Few seconds. 1, 2, 3. Go on.
All right. Salãmun Alaykum, everyone, to this Quran study. Last time we ended at Surah 20, verse 97. So today we will continue on Surah 20, verse 28, 98, inshallah. And I will be your teacher today, Ahmad Wahbe. Some people don't believe I exist. Anyways. Verse 98. Okay, so before we read the Quran, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. It begins with a subtitle. You have but one God. Your only God is God, the one beside whom there is no other God. His knowledge encompasses all things. We thus narrate to you some news from the past generations. We have revealed to you a message from us. Those who disregard it will bear a load of sins on the day of resurrection. Eternally they abide therein. What a miserable load on the day of resurrection. That is the day when the horn is blown, and we summon the guilty on that day blue. Just a quick comment here. So we see here. It said, we have revealed to you a message from us. And the next verse says, those who disregard it will bear a load of sins on the day of resurrection. So, just disregarding it, you invite someone to the religion or to the truth, and they just disregard it. That means they are marked. You can't save them. That is the day when the horn is blown, and we summon the guilty on that day blue. Basically, they are miserable. Let's continue. Whispering among themselves, they will say, you have stayed in the first life no more than 10 days. We are fully aware of their utterances. The most accurate among them will say, you stayed no more than a day. That's because we are, like, when we are in this world, this finite world, we are part of it. We are, even though our souls are eternal, we, the body, our body, and we are bound to the body, is part of this test, this world, and this world is limited. So on the day of resurrection, when it vanishes, when this world ends, we will notice that we only lasted like barely any time at all. Well, actually, it says, the disbelievers, they will whisper among themselves and say that in this life they stayed no more than 10 days. So they are still unaware. They still don't understand how long they lasted. They are still unaware of what is going on. And then the most accurate among them will say, you stayed no more than a day. And these are the people who know what's going on. Those who already believed and they knew about this whole creation and how it all works. Anyways, let's continue. Verse 105. On the day of resurrection, this subtitle. They ask you about the mountains. Say, my Lord will wipe them out. He will leave them like a barren, flat land. Not even the slightest hill will you see therein, nor a dip. On that day, everyone will follow the caller, without the slightest deviation. All sounds will be hushed before the most gracious. You will hear nothing but whispers. On that day, intercession will be useless, except for those permitted by the most gracious, and whose utterances conform to his will. So basically, there is no intercession. And those who intercede already know, they are aware of God's system. They studied the scripture. They were blessed with guidance and all that, so they know how God's system works. For example, if someone died under the age of 40, then you will say you will intercede on their behalf, but it's because it's already given. It's not like you can affect anything, but you can still mention it. But it doesn't mean you have any power. You're just stating the obvious. Verse 110. He knows their past and their future, while none encompasses his knowledge. All faces will submit to the living, the eternal, and those who are burdened by their transgressions will fail. As for those who work righteousness while believing, they will have no fear of injustice or adversity. This is a very important principle or system. Our righteous work only count if we believe. So, for example, let's say you're an atheist and you give to charity. That doesn't count. Your soul is not going to grow. Yeah. And then, of course, if you later on submit, you believe in God, then yes, then all that will transform to credits. But until you believe, then it counts like nothing. Because for what purpose are you giving if you don't believe in God? For example, we can see so many rich, like billionaires, who are atheists, I think, and they brag about giving to charity, and you see it in the newspaper and whatever. but for what purpose are they giving? It's basically for popularity, for some egoistic sense of portraying yourself as a good person. And there's a big difference between being a good person and portraying yourself as a good person. And let's continue. Verse 113. We thus revealed it an Arabic Quran, and we cited in it all kinds of prophecies, that they may be saved, or it may cause them to take heed. Most exalted is God, the only true King. Do not rush into uttering the Quran before it is revealed to you, and say, My Lord, increase my knowledge. So this is a very important teaching here, that this is a commandment, or rather an order. Well, okay, let's say commandment from God, saying, say, my Lord, increase my knowledge. So by having this as a command, we get in the practice, we practice this mentality, or rather it helps us to remember that all knowledge comes from God. Plus, it's a prayer. Say, my Lord, increase my knowledge. Basically, you just say, my Lord, increase my knowledge. And that's a valid prayer that God commands us to say. And this verse 114, if you notice, 114 surahs, that's the total surahs of the Quran. Anyways, some traditionalists will tell you that this verse is about the Prophet Muhammad, but I beg to differ. It's about everyone. This verse is addressing everyone. So this advice, do not rush into uttering the Quran before it is revealed to you, this applies to us as well, to everyone. Because it is very common for especially new converts, where they are like rushing through the Quran, and they find things that maybe they don't agree with or they don't like, and then they ruin their chance at guidance, basically, because they make up their mind to not submit. But the whole idea is to trust God and submit to God totally. And that can't be rushed. We can't rush through that. It's a process, it takes time. There's a lot of learning, there's a lot of life experience that needs to be gained. For example, the Quran talks about betrayal and mercy, and like, okay, the Quran says be merciful, be nice, be kind, justice. But let's say you have never been betrayed in your life, or you have never experienced like some serious injustice. then that becomes easy to you to accept it. But then you arrive, like 2 years later, something happens that challenges you. Life experience that makes those verses much more real, much more realistic, and much more harder to abide by, to follow. And that's when you're tested. That's why you can't rush through it from the beginning. We should follow and submit to God's commandments as if the worst thing has already happened. Let's say you haven't broken your leg yet, but pretend you have broken your leg. How will you act? Like, don't wait 10 years until you break your leg. Pretend you broke your leg today. How will your reaction be? Are you going to complain to God, blame God? What is your attitude? How will you as a person react? Where is your, like, who are you, right? When we challenge ourselves in those kind of ways, that's when we discover our weaknesses. And it's very important that we really examine ourselves deeply, thoroughly, because maybe once you actually break your leg, you're gonna say something or whatever and become the enemy of God in just a second, just like that, because you are weak and you didn't practice, you didn't strengthen your faith, you didn't strengthen yourself, you didn't value the weight of the verses and the commandments. Basically rushed through it, thinking, oh, I know this, oh, this is nothing. No, you can't do that. These are God's words. They are heavier than heavy. Does that make
Sorry,
sense?
Ahmed, I hear like this clicking sound a lot.
Yeah, it's my... Oh, sorry. It's my computer mouse. Use it to scroll.
Okay.
All right, let's continue. Verse 115. Subtitled, Humans Fail to Make a Firm Stand. We tested Adam in the past, but he forgot, and we found him indecisive. So this is now telling us what happened, and this gives us a look into how we failed as well. Adam is basically representing all of mankind. It says Adam, but it is actually us as well. So when it says Adam, like throughout the Quran, you have to consider yourself just as guilty. And there's a footnote. When Satan challenged God's absolute authority, you and I did not make a firm stand against Satan. God is giving us a chance on this earth to redeem ourselves by denouncing Satan and upholding God's absolute authority. So that's what it's all about. Recall that we said to the angels, fall prostrate before Adam. They fall prostrate, except Satan. He refused. We then said, O Adam, this is an enemy of you and your wife. Do not let him evict you from paradise, lest you become miserable. You are guaranteed never to hunger therein, nor go unsheltered, nor will you thirst therein, nor suffer from any heat. So this is God telling Adam, telling us about that Satan is our enemy. But the devil whispered to him, saying, O Adam, let me show you the tree of eternity and unending kingship. So here's an interesting, like minor detail that is interesting. You know how everyone says, well, not us specifically, but the majority of the world's population, they believe that the devil whispered to Eve, or Adam's wife. But here, God tells us the devil whispered to Adam. Of course, it was to both of them, but here it specifically mentions Adam. So let's stop blaming Eve. It's not her fault only. Anyways, so you see here how Satan lies. Satan can only attack us by lying. That's his tactic. It is his number one tool. And people keep falling for it. Verse 121. They ate from it, whereupon their bodies became visible to them, and they tried to cover themselves with the leaves of paradise. Adam thus disobeyed his Lord and fell. Subsequently, his Lord chose him, redeemed him, and guided him. He said, Go down therefrom, all of you. You are enemies of one another. When guidance comes to you from me, anyone who follows my guidance will not go astray, nor suffer any misery. So a quick note here. It says, where God said, Go down therefrom, all of you. You are enemies of one another. So it is referring to all of you, and then you are enemies of one another. So basically everyone is an enemy of each other. So it's not saying only humans versus Satan, but humans are can also be enemies of each other. Like this instinct where we feel this rivalry. And it is observable. You can study it. For example, men feel that other men are their rivals, and women feel that other women are their rivals. It is like a strange instinct, basically, and I think we are supposed to overcome it, control that instinct. Let's continue. Subtitle: For the disbelievers, miserable life unavoidable. As for the one who disregards my message, he will have a miserable life, and we resurrect him on the day of resurrection blind. So, like I read in the beginning, God sent us a message, and then anyone who disregards it will have a heavy weight of sins. And then here it confirms again, anyone who disregards my message, he will have a miserable life. So, of course, there is this argument that, oh, what if someone never received the message? Just it is enough to just have been seen it at a glance or heard of it. That's enough. That's enough to be held accountable. So they don't have to open the Quran and read it from start to finish and then disregard it. It's enough if you go to them, you say, here's God's message, and they disregard it. They ignore it without even opening it, without even caring. That's enough. Right? Because that's what the blind person does. That's the allegory of blindness. Oh, you want to turn away, pretend you didn't see it. Well, okay, we will resurrect you blind. Let's continue. Okay, so this person will then say, he will say, my Lord, why did you summon me blind when I used to be a seer? He will say, because you forgot our revelations when they came to you. You are now forgotten. We thus requite those who transgress and refuse to believe in the revelations of their Lord. The retribution in the hereafter is far worse and everlasting. Does it ever occur to them how many previous generations we have annihilated? They are now walking in the homes of those before them. These are signs for those who possess intelligence. If it were not for your Lord's predetermined plan, they would have been judged immediately. Therefore, be patient in the face of their utterances, and praise and glorify your Lord before sunrise and before sunset, and during the night glorify him, as well as both ends of the day, that you may be happy. So that's the secret of happiness, remembering God. And do not covet what we bestowed upon any other people. Such are temporary ornaments of this life, whereby we put them to the test. What your Lord provides for you is far better and everlasting. So this is a commandment, like do not covet, right? Don't be jealous. Like God knows we have in us the ability to be jealous, and that, like I mentioned before about the instinct of being rivals, it all goes back to that instinct. Without that instinct, enemies of one another, then you wouldn't covet what someone else had, because you wouldn't have this feeling of racing. You're not racing. No, it's not a race. That feeling wouldn't exist. But God, when we were cast down here, we became enemies of one another, and with this instinct to see each other as rivals. And when we submit to God, God will help us get rid of this feeling and instead appreciate other people's success and encourage each other to be successful, and not feel jealousy at all. We will feel like we're all brothers and we help each other. And you see someone succeed and you become happy for them. And this is a trait of the believers. You will never see a disbeliever with feeling happy for someone else's success. So this rivalry, enemies of one another, that's a punishment. It's an instinct that is also a punishment. I'm gonna end soon. Just a couple more verses. Verse 132, subtitled "The Parent's Responsibility." You shall enjoin your family to observe the contact prayers, salat, and steadfastly persevere in doing so. We do not ask you for any provisions. We are the ones who provide for you. The ultimate triumph belongs to the righteous. So, quick note here. So we are supposed to encourage our family, relatives, and remind them, steadfastly, pray, do the contact prayers, seek God constantly, steadfastly persevere. It doesn't say once, you do it once only, and then they argue with you and you give up. No, it says steadfastly persevere. Okay, let's continue. Subtitle, why messengers? Okay, so now we will know why God sends messengers, and it's hilarious. It's you will see. They said, if he could only show us a miracle from his Lord, did they not receive sufficient miracles with the previous messages? Had we annihilated them before this, they would have said, our Lord, had you sent a messenger to us, we would have followed your revelation and would have avoided this shame and humiliation. Say, all of us are waiting, so wait, you will surely find out who are on the correct path and who are truly guided. So that's why messengers are so important, why God sends messengers. It is to eliminate the argument that, if you had sent messengers, then we would have believed. So it is important part of God's system to send messengers. And I will end on that note. Alhamdulillah. We can begin discussing the verses, inshallah.
MashaAllah, a good Quran study.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
I'm sorry if I sounded tired. I haven't slept.
So, one question, verse 130.
130.
130. I seek refuge in God. I seek refuge in God from Satan. and be rejected. It says, therefore, be patient in the face of their utterance, and praise and glorify your Lord before sunrise and before sunset. So we know before sunrise and before sunset is before Fajr and before Maghrib. It's also said, and during the night, glorify him. So, okay, so that's clear, right? Then it went on to say, as well as both ends of the day, that you may be happy. So when it talks about both ends of the day, we had already we're already God willing glorifying before sunrise
I
and
understand
before.
what you're trying to say. I don't think this is referring to the salat.
Yeah,
This is just like something you do. You have to.
Yeah. There's nothing to do with salat. No, I'm not saying this has to do with salat.
Okay.
This is glorifying, like zikr.
Zikr, yeah.
Okay, so let's say zikr. Praise and glorify. It's like a zikr.
Mm-hmm.
So we do it before sunrise and before sunset. So that is before Fajr and before Maghrib and during the night. So we understand that. It says as well as both ends of the day. So we already doing before Fajr and before Maghrib. So I would understand both ends of the day. So would that be like after Isha?
So and before sunset, that's basically the afternoon, and then you see the sun set. And then when it has begun, once it has set, that's when the end of the day comes, right?
Yeah. So as well as both ends of the day.
Yeah.
So that would be between Maghrib and Isha.
So let's see. Let's put both ends of the day.
And I would read ends of the day
So
as end of the day would be
the
after.
Fajr. Yeah,
So would that be between Fajr and sunrise and Maghrib and Isha?
yeah, it's basically 24/7.
Masha Allah.
It's good exercise.
Yes.
Six
Alhamdulillah.
pack.
I would comment about verse 132 about parents' responsibility.
Yes, baby.
So this is basically shows to us that when it says, "You shall enjoin your family to observe the contact prayers and steadfastly persevere in doing so." I mean, it simply shows that what the responsibility of the parents is towards their children is to enjoin them, to exhort them to be righteous, to observe the contact prayers, and basically they have to steadfastly persevere in doing that. So, and then the messenger of the covenant actually is explained in this. It's like he said that you know God is the one who controls the minds of your children, right? But you have to do your part, which is to consistently exhort them to do their contact prayers. But if you're not consistent about it, then obviously your child is going to have problems. But if you're being consistent about it and you make it a habit that you always tell them to do their prayer, you're not going to have problems with it, and your children are automatically going to be doing what God is telling you to do. You do your part, and then God will do his part, and he controls them, and he'll do all their prayers. And having said that, like this doesn't really like violate any of God's commandments, such as no compulsion of religion, because you're not forcing them to do it. You're enjoining them, like you're telling them in a serious fashion. You're stressing them that they have to do it, they should do it. But let's say if a child ever disagreed or refused to do it, uh, you wouldn't like force them or threaten them or anything like that. But But the thing is that if you do your part, and from an early age you enjoin your children to do their prayer, I mean, it would never come to that point, because you're doing what God is telling you to do, and the child will basically follow and do his part. And if I was to tie that into circumcision, I would say
Do it.
do it, or you'll get circumcised again. Right. Yeah, I mean, you don't impose the religion on children. So this is their only responsibility, to encourage
Yeah.
them and teach them to do their contact prayers, and that's it.
But
Which
it
makes
can't
sense because it's a
be
practice of religion.
compared to circumcision, because circumcision is permanent.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So encouraging children, I mean, it's children. They are children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's encouraging them to do the right thing. That's not oppression or compulsion of religion. That's nonsense. Like, who would even argue like that? Do people use that as an argument?
No, I've never seen them use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting because this is the only parent's responsibility we see in the Quran. Right.
I mean, children, like, depending on their age, they might like put their finger on some wire or something. They are children.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. I mean, if we see a child maybe using the knife wrong, when you're not supposed to cut towards you, you're supposed to cut again away from you. Basic things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Basic wood cutting techniques. Are you not going to grab your child's hands and like, what are you doing? You do it like this. That's not.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We have to teach them the religion, so I guess that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
You have to, yeah.
And then as they, grow up, they have their ability to think for themselves becomes better and better, and then you naturally begin to treat them uh, as capable, basically mature or whatever. And then if they choose to disbelieve, you can't do anything, but you can still remind them. And that's different from that's a different stage. That's a later stage. They are old. But as a child, teenager, and young adult, you have to be steadfastly like, encouraging them to do the right thing and stuff like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's very important for children, because you'll see that, or what I've seen is that parents that have neglected their responsibility when it came to enjoining the children to do the contact prayers, it becomes very, very difficult, like at a later stage, to even encourage them to do it, because you have been inconsistent with them, and then they end up, having all sorts of problems. I mean, the fact that you didn't do your part, you actually take your children out of God's protection that way as well, because you didn't observe God's laws, and then children will have issues, like all kinds of, like, kids have like psychological problems and all kinds of problems. So if you really care about your children, I mean, this is what is a responsibility of all the parents, to be very consistent about it.
Yeah, I have a short story. I have a cousin, and his family, very liberal. The father don't pray or whatever. They call themselves Muslims, of course, but very like moderate or liberal, I don't know. And they have this youngest son who they encourage him, go drink, go sleep around, and they are proud of him. Oh, look at my son, he so many women, so many girls, and so many so many friends, like whatever. And they're proud of him. And then now once he's like an adult, he's living at home and he still sleeps around, invites different girls to their home. And he does weird things like orders food for $1,000 a month that he doesn't pay for. He doesn't pay for anything. Very rebellious, very angry, entitled. It's very strange attitude in adult life. He's an adult person now, doing these things. And that's a result of parents not doing their job.
Yeah.
Encouraging
Yeah, I mean, I've
sin
seen.
instead of scolding them. Like, that's what you get.
I've seen submitter parents who didn't encourage their children. They end up having psychological problems and taking drugs and everything. They just end up going on Satan's path.
Yeah,
A lot of them.
in adulthood. That's so weird. Yeah, but I guess it's very usual among the disbelievers. So to see submitters suffering from that's a punishment, basically.
Exactly.
They didn't do the responsibility.
If you look at it from the angle of just comparing that to people around, I mean, how the culture is set up around the parents' responsibility. I mean, if parents are not responsible, for example, enough to send their child to school or whatever, they the CPS, the Child Protective Services, would be called, and the parents would be in serious trouble. But based on the Quran, I mean, of course, we have to do all that for our kids too, but based on the Quran, God is telling us that this is the parent's responsibility. So if you're a parent and you want to be responsible, you want to be considered a responsible parent, then that's what you have to do.
Yeah, you actually have to take responsibility. It's some people might argue, oh, but they will grow up and they will do whatever they want anyways. But okay, but let's say that does happen. That doesn't mean you're innocent unless you actually did take your responsibility. For example, you can't say that it's not your fault that your child is doing this and this in adulthood while you didn't actually take any responsibility at all. Then you are actually responsible. It's your fault. As long as we don't take responsibility, then it is our fault because we did nothing. We were standing by, watching.
Yeah.
So we contributed to the child's misguidance.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Hmm?
I was just gonna make a joke. Of course, some people take it to the extreme, like that Christian preacher who when a child took God's name in vain, and the preacher said, "Why punched him in the belly?" That's a bit extreme. Okay, never mind.
Sorry, what did the preacher say? I couldn't hear
No,
you.
the preacher was a Christian preacher.
Creature?
Preacher.
What?
Christian preacher.
Oh, Christian preacher.
Christian priest. He was telling a story, and I heard this kid take God's name in vain. So I ran up to him and I punched him with all my power in his stomach.
Oh my God.
And he was so proud. This priest was really proud.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like a child, like I don't know, 8 years old maybe.
Oh my goodness.
It's a YouTube on it. But yeah, that's a bit extreme. So not like that, basically.
Yeah, you just give them incentives, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, you do all your prayers, you know, I'll buy you something you really want or something like that. You know, you encourage them until they start just doing it on their own. Of course, you don't punish them or anything, but you just give them these incentives, and any child will do it.
I think a better trick would be to, okay, if you do it, you will have to clean less today. You know, psychology. If you do it, you won't have to do all the dishes. You can do 90%. That's it.
10% off.
10% off. That's how you do it.
Yeah, of course you can't do that with circumcision because that's already 10% off. Actually, it's more than 10% off.
That's life.
That's another joke. Okay. Adam, I think Adam was saying something. Adam,
You know, I was just gonna say about you're right about parenting issues, and I was listening to one of the audios from the Messenger of the Covenant, where he was saying that that you cannot be harsh with your children, you cannot beat them. You have to communicate with them in a civilized manner. And before it was difficult because growing up in a culture, Asian culture, slapping, hitting is just normal. But when I start to understand where he was coming from, it makes sense because these are souls. They command respect too. You respect them, they will respect you just like any other human being. And he was very pro on sending them to regular school, not doing a home study because he said that's how they grow. So I would like you to also talk about it, that like he was saying, that not to beat your child and talk to them in a civilized manner. And the second question was that second actually is more like a comment, that that's what I see in most of the submitter families. This is to your earlier talk, that they don't actually follow the religion properly. They just do the easy part where they say, okay, we submit to God and we will not worship anybody else. But they take the religion so lightly that that when we're reading that you may be happy, glorify before both ends of the day. So I notice some of the submitters that they don't follow properly, and when they're not happy, and then they start to reject absolute happiness now and forever, this verse. And I mean, this is like, I would say you are rejecting to what God is saying, because God is saying absolute happiness now and forever. You cannot deny that. Even the messenger is saying, they read my lips in that sense. So I think that's my comment.
Yeah, actually, the Master of the Covenant, like he didn't just say like don't beat them. He says don't even touch them. So like some people say, oh, I can just slap them, or I can slap them lightly, or no, you don't get physical with them at all,
Right.
which is very important. And he said if you do, later on it will come to bite you. They'll shame you when they grow up. And but yeah, I mean, what you said about these so-called submitters, I mean, I don't consider that submission, right? Because submission is there's no partial submission. We have to totally submit. So when you just pick and choose, that's really not submission. That's following your own religion in a way. And that's why they don't. If you break one commandment deliberately, or disregard a bunch of commandments deliberately, then you can't enter God's kingdom, because you're deliberately disregarding God's commandments. I mean, when you enter God's kingdom, that happens after you make the decision that you're going to follow all of God's commandments, and you're going to be the best person you can be, and then act on it until you pass all your tests. Going into getting into paradise is not I mean, it's not that easy. Like people think that they will just do their salat and stuff and then they'll just enter. They don't, because you have to observe. We have the Quran, we have a huge responsibility, we have the mathematical miracle, and we have to do all the commandments. And especially if we truly believe that this is our only chance, a true believer who truly believes in the hereafter will do everything in his power to get as much credit as possible in this world. Of course, some will get more than the others, but when you deliberately decide to disregard and not even try to do your best or average, even like you're cheating yourself basically, and you can't cheat God. He knows our innermost thoughts. And people like that, I mean, they obviously have doubts. Until you have doubts, I mean, you can't, these serious doubts, I mean, you can't really make it.
So some of the commandments, they are compulsory, and some of the commandments you read is like optional, like they don't like required. So, but in that sense, those are not required. Can you be a little bit lenient on them, or how do you define those?
Like optional, you mean like meditate for extra credit or something, or what kind of optional?
Yeah, those kind.
I mean, when you see the people that say that they submit, if they follow, I mean, if they're not deliberately breaking God's commandments, then they should be okay, right? I mean, they could be weak believers. But let's say, let this one, for example, God says this is the parent's responsibility. Chewing on the parents, it's a requirement, it's a commandment. Just because it's not your, for religious practices doesn't mean it's not a requirement. So this is a requirement for all parents to do it, right? So, for example, you can't look at this verse and say this is optional, because it's not. There's just so many other verses, You cannot lie, you cannot cheat, you all of these verses. I mean, there's a lot of commandments. But yeah, I mean, if there's things like extra credit, I mean, if you didn't grow your soul to that degree, you could go to lower heaven, for example, right? You would go end up in lower heaven. But if you deliberately are not doing certain things, and then you end up being in that position where you don't even believe in God's promise anymore, then you're opposing God and his messenger, then you're going to end up in hell for sure. You're going to be annihilated, just like the other disbelievers, and we see that, unfortunately.
Masha Allah, thank you. If nobody have comment, I can do like another comment.
Yeah, sure, feel free.
It's okay. So as we were doing the Quran study in the previous Surah 1986 and Surah 2109, and it's kind of amazingly how they're interlocking with each other. 1986, God says, and we will hurt the guilty to hell to be their eternal abode. 87. No one will possess the power to intercede except those who conform to the laws of the most gracious. So that one, and then you read 2109. On that day, intercession will be useless except for those permitted by the most gracious and whose utterance conform to his will. So if you look at those two verses, and to me, I think they appear to be like one is the intercessor and one is who's getting the benefit. Like the 87 is who will be allowed to intercede is the one conforms to the law. And then the 109, it appears to be the who will get the intercession. I think that's my understanding. We can clarify more on that. So, in order to be intercede in any way, there has to be interest in someone who can intercede and who receives, but both have to be approved by God. If one is not approved in both parties, the intercession will fail. It's like you work for a company, and you have a lot of value. And you want to have your son or maybe someone to hire, that person has to meet minimum requirement. You cannot just say hire this person. This person has to have some level of achievement. And I think it's amazing how these both surahs back to back and these verses towards the end. I think that's amazing. Do you see that 109 and 87?
Were you saying that the intercessor also has to have certain qualifications or not?
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I mean. That the one who intercedes, like, has to be proved. I mean, nobody can just go and say intercede, and the one who's getting the benefit has to have minimum, whatever the God's, God knows.
Yeah.
Nobody
Right.
just like going to hell. You can pull them out of the hell.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody the thing is, if somebody's already destined for heaven, if if you say, let this person go to heaven, you don't need to have a qualification because that person's already going to heaven, right?
Right.
So you don't need to do any. You don't need to have a criteria. Let's say that you're a bad person and you say, admit this person into paradise, for example. Well, that person's already destined for paradise, so he's gonna go. So in that sense, the only requirement is for that person to be deserving of it, right? That's how I see it.
Then what kind of intercession God is talking about here?
Well, I mean, that's
Okay,
it.
well.
In accordance with God's will, that if the intercession will only be accepted if that person deserves to go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no
So if
second requirement.
the person is already going to heaven, the intercession, what benefit would give him?
That's what it means. That's why God says there's no intercession in that sense. In the real sense, there's no such thing. But it is a thing when if someone says it, then it's a thing because the person will only go to heaven if they deserve it, right? So if you really look at it from this perception, then really when God says there's no intercession, because there is no intercessors between us. If you take anyone as an intercessor, that's idol worship, right?
Right.
So
That makes sense.
there's no such thing as intercession. That basically the power belongs to God, and but if someone does say that God, please admit this person into heaven, you can call intercession, but it's not really intercession as we know it, like what people use it for, because that person's already going to heaven. It's like It's like someone is already going to Hawaii, and you ask God, God, please let this person go to Hawaii. Well, he's gonna go anyways,
Right.
because it's planned for him. He deserves to go, whatever. you know. So you're saying or not saying is not gonna make a difference, basically.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Salman, I think, yeah, the way you explained, right, and I think majority of the people, they kind of, I guess, understand a little bit differently. People would, look at it more of a, okay, if someone is going to hell, and if someone's interested on their behalf, then they will go to heaven, as opposed to, someone is already going to heaven, right? And whether you interested or not, like, for example, it could be your parents or, your children, that they're already going to, one of them is going to heaven, and as a children, if they're interested to God, God said, yeah, your parent is going to heaven regardless. But the perception is, your parents is going to hell, and as a children, if you intercede on their behalf, then they will go to heaven. I guess that's a big difference, the understanding.
But if the parents are idol worshiper, God says anyone who idolizes beside him, that's a law. God has forbidden heaven for that person.
No, absolutely. No, I was just kind of expanding on that one, what Suleiman mentioned. I think majority Muslims, they think kind of opposite way, that someone is going to hell. And if one of the party is, righteous, and if they intercede on their behalf, then, if God wills, then they will take them to heaven or so. But that's not the case.
That's how they see intercession.
Yeah, that's how they see it.
Oh, you're talking about the general Muslim community, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
It looks like intercession for the third party, for the outsider. For example, let's say I know someone you don't know, and I know, like, we're aware of God's system. It's like I said earlier, we're just stating the obvious. So I'm stating the obvious about this person to God. Oh, this is my friend. He did this and this, and I'm stating the obvious. And I know, like, it's between me and God. But to you, a third person who doesn't know this person, it will look like intercession. Am I making sense?
I guess there's silence. One thing.
I got disconnected. I was listening to the YouTube, what you said.
It is intercession to the outside. The outsider will look at it as intercession, understand it as intercession.
Yeah.
That's the illusion, basically. It's just an illusion. But to you,
Yeah, I think another.
yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing is that we know that you can't ask forgiveness for idol worshippers because idol worship is unforgivable offense, for example, right? So if someone's going to hell, they committed idol worship, you can't even ask God to admit this person into heaven because that's against God's law. That one, we can't ask God to forgive idol worshippers, and two, God's not gonna admit them into paradise if they maintain idol worship till death.
Yeah, exactly. And those who intercede in accordance with God's will, like stating the obvious, they already know God's system. They know that they can't intercede on behalf of someone who's an idol worshipper. So it's basically just stating the obvious. Like, oh, this guy, like, maybe they are not that clever. I don't know. Maybe they. I can just guess. I mean, I can give an example. I don't know, but you as a person, you will know the individual. If you have lived with someone and you know someone, you will know. Like, plus, at the day of resurrection, we will all see each other's record, so we will know. So it's not. There's no guesswork. You know, oh, I knew this about this guy. So please God, forgive him. That's, and you know, it's all in his record. It's all according to God's system, and in his record it says he deserves lower heaven, high heaven, or whatever. And you are just stating the obvious. You're just raising your voice. That's all it is. It is not, okay, God, I'm gonna decide that this person deserves heaven. That's not it. That's making yourself a god. You're making yourself a god besides God. And I believe that's what most people, that's the kind of intercession most people are believing in. Like the Christians and the Mohammedans, and probably many, many more. I think the Buddhists as well, they pray to Buddha. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, hi. Actually, verse 102. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. It says, that is the day when the horn is blown, and we summon the guilty on that day blue. I understand blue to mean like a sad day, or that's what we understand blue to be. Is there any other point of view out there?
I think some people believe that's literally blue too.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Salman.
Blue. So, what would be like a blue?
Everything
like a color
will
would be blue.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what Salman is saying.
the Arabic word reminds me of like a Lebanese saying or whatever, but basically it means strained, like they are like blue, like they are, and we summon the guilty on that day blue. It's referring to this, to the people being summoned. They are their condition is blue. So in Arabic it basically means like strained, like given up. They're exhausted. They are. Am I making sense? I don't know if there is one English word that represents it, but blue is a good word.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how in the medical community they call the code blue, which is mean that if somebody
Yeah.
cannot breathe and having an issue, and you can see their face turning blue. So maybe they were so fear in that their faces will turn blue in that
Yeah.
fear,
Plus,
I
you can
guess.
say like you can recognize by looking at them, and darkness. You can see the darkness on their face and stuff. So
Yeah, exactly. They are basically depleted. They are strained. They are
And God says people will be exhausted and scatter. They look like they're intoxicated and they're staggering. So there's physical signs we will see by looking at them. Also, and the believers, they will have light, on their right, and so.
So not the blue day sky. I don't think there will be a sky even.
And the next question was on one. Thanks, everyone. And the next question was on 114. Most exalted is God, the only true King. Do not rush into uttering the Quran before it is revealed to you, and say, "My Lord, increase my knowledge." So when I was a traditional, I would have believed this to be that this was applied to the Prophet Muhammad alone. However, I understand, Ahmed, I understand your explanation. So this would be basically for anyone who is new, not to rush into understanding. Like, God will give you that knowledge, a piece by
No,
piece.
to everyone, not just new, but to everyone. Like even if you
everyone.
are 10 years, 20 years, 30 years submitter,
Submitter,
doesn't
yes,
matter.
yes,
It
that's
applies
right.
all the time.
Yeah, mashallah. Thank you.
But I just took the beginner as an example because they are the usual ones that like fall. They're the first ones who fall into the pit, basically, into this wall. They hit a wall, basically, and they give up. So that's why I mentioned the beginners, to encourage them to push on. I mean, if I can continue on that, we're sitting here and we're still learning. So imagine a beginner, so overwhelmed.
Yeah, mashallah.
And from my own experience, I know it works. It's a system. For example, I remember in the beginning where I was a new submitter, I would rush through the Quran, rush through the religion to master it, basically. But then I stumble upon something I couldn't accept, or I had trouble accepting. And that would be like a stop, basically. But I don't know, in my case, I just pushed it aside and continued. And then I returned later. Or actually, this verse here stuck with me. Alhamdulillah. So I would always ask God to increase my knowledge. And I knew that I couldn't understand everything at once. I don't know. I mean, obviously, God inspired me to have this understanding. Like, do not rush to make this verse heavy for me, like stick in my mind. Because every time I read the Quran and I stumbled on something I couldn't understand, or some contradiction, or someone like a website that says something that contradicts, and I get like this doubt or whatever, then this verse reminds me, be patient, don't rush into it. With time God will reveal it. And that's the system. And exactly like 1 week later, I would find the answer, and all doubt would be removed, like magic. So it's a system that works. And yeah, I don't know how to convince people who like, if they don't, I don't know how to convince people that the magic is real. Subhanallah.
Masha Allah, yeah, Ahmed, that's a very, very good point. See, we are learning here. That really makes sense what you just said. That this Quran is very deep. Like 7 oceans times 2 will not even be enough to explain it. When you say that, when like some of the verses that we don't understand, like we were just talking about intercession, we cannot fully comprehend that verse. And sometimes when we're reading a verse and we cannot understand, sometimes we like just scratching our head. What is the meaning? I mean, we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, if it's easy, God will explain to us. If it's not the right time, if we read the verse and if we cannot make it up, that's okay. Don't stress yourself. When the right time comes, when you achieve, like you cannot have somebody who's in on college level and somebody in school. They have a different levels. You cannot teach a bachelor degree to a fifth grader. So when your time comes, God will make it easy for you to understand. And some of the verses we should not be like intercession. We should be just worshiping and obeying God. I mean, why these verses? God knows their deep meaning. We shouldn't be worried about these verses because that's not the point. We are here to obey God. And whatever the intercession is, God knows the deep meaning of that, and He will explain to us whatever the meaning is, and not to let ourselves get confused with the verses, which we don't know the meaning, and we project our own opinion upon those verses, right?
Okay. Well, I kind of slightly disagree with that. The myth of intercession has been explained like really clearly. There is a whole appendix 8, titled "The Myth of Intercession," and I mean that really clearly explains like it's not a very ambiguous concept to understand. So I mean if you're looking for a deeper meaning, like there's nothing really to it. It's just like a formality. Like let's say somebody's already going to heaven, and you say, God, admit this person to heaven. Whatever you're saying, all you need to understand, it's not going to make a difference, basically, because uh, the person's only going to go to heaven if he truly deserves it, right? But for us, let's say when we ask God for anything, it's a form of worship. So that's for us. But for the person, it's not going to benefit him. If the person is deserving of it, he'll go to heaven anyways. So that's all really there is to it, intercession. And if there's any more, doubts, like, or I mean, any more things that might be unclear, I mean, you can look at the appendix, but it's like really simple.
We could also argue with the opposite. For example, if intercession worked, then the opposite would also work. I could say, "Oh, that person is evil." Let's say the guy is really good. He's the perfect guy. He's going to the highest heaven. And I'm like, no, he's bad. He's bad. So if intercession worked, then that should also work. The opposite should also work then. But alhamdulillah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would be in deep trouble.
No, yeah, Solomon, I understand. No, that was just an example I took about the intercession.
Oh,
You have you probably understand more, but in generally, I'm talking some verses that we don't understand. We shouldn't be
right.
putting ourselves
Right.
to pressure.
Yeah. I think like some concepts are like essential to understand if for us not to be idol, like not to be considered idol worshippers, right? Because let's say a Muslim, traditional Muslim, who believes in intercession comes into submission, right? I mean, he can't like put this on the back burner because it's about worshiping God alone. So and it's explained by the messenger, like it's not a trivial concept. I mean it's not like a very difficult concept, because like it's explained very very simply, like in simple words, like If you look at the one paragraph, for example, it says the myth of the myth. Okay, let me read this. It says to believe that anyone other than God can intercede on our behalf to have our sins forgiven or our wishes fulfilled is to set up partners with God. So this is idolatry. It says the Quran proclaims that all intercession belongs to God and that there will be no intercession on the day of judgment. There will be no intercession on the day of judgment. The myth of intercession is one of Satan's most effective tricks to dupe millions of people into idol worship. Millions of Christians believe that Jesus will intercede for them at God, and millions of Muslims believe that Muhammad will intercede on their behalf. Consequently, these people idolize Jesus and Muhammad. The concept of intercession is utterly illogical. Those who believe in Muhammad's intercession, for example, claim that he will ask God to forgive them and admit them into paradise. They imagine Muhammad on the day of judgment choosing the candidates for his intercession. If you ask those who believe in intercession, how will Muhammad recognize those who deserve his intercession? They will tell you, God will tell him. According to this concept, a person will go to Muhammad and request his intercession. Muhammad will then ask God whether this person deserves his intercession or not. God will inform Muhammad that the person deserves to go to paradise. Muhammad will then turn around and tell God that the person deserves to go to paradise. This blasphemy is obvious. The blasphemy is obvious. Those who believe in intercession um, make God a secretary of their idol, Muhammad. God be glorified. Since the Quran is the most accurate book, it acknowledges that everyone in paradise will intercede on behalf of his or her loved ones. Please God, admit my mother into paradise. This intercession will work if the person's mother deserves to go to paradise. Thus intercession, though it will take place in this manner, is utterly useless. We learn from the Quran that Abraham, God's beloved servant, could not intercede on behalf of his father. Noah could not intercede on behalf of his son. Muhammad could not intercede on behalf of his uncle or relatives. What makes anyone think that a prophet or a saint will intercede on behalf of a perfect stranger? So there's really, I guess, a very simple concept in that sense, and it's really important to understand because it's a difference between worshiping God alone and idol worship, right? So it's not like talking about the color of the people blue, for example. That's a totally okay thing. You can use that kind of an example for that, like whether the faces will be blue or whether they'll be sad or both. I mean, that you can say that, but intercession, I mean, you have to understand it.
Yeah, thank you, Masha Allah. That makes definitely understanding. All we need to do is just devote ourselves to God, obey God, and try our best to strive and not leave any stone unturned, I guess. I guess those people, they want to reject God. They will do it in any way. How you were reading these verses, 134 and 133 and 134. And if you read them backward, like if you read 34 first, have we annihilated them? Have we annihilated them before? So in that verse, they say, if God have sent us a messenger. And verse 133, they said, if God have sent us a miracle. So first they're saying, send us a messenger. So when God sends them a messenger, now they're talking about if God sends us a miracle. So they have disease in their heart. No matter what happens, they will reject, as God says in Surah 6:111, that even if He sent down the angels to them, even if the dead spoke to them, even if He summoned every miracle before them, they cannot believe unless God wills it. Indeed, most of them are ignorant. So no one is going to reject no matter what you do. and they will not believe. So don't don't make your life hard and just miserable, that why this person is not. If this person has that disease, even God says nothing will help them unless if God wills it. Masha Allah.
Salãmun Alaykum. Oh, everybody keep on silence.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, Ahmed. How are you today, Ahmed? How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. I'm tired. What do you guys think about,
Yeah.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think about
I'm interested on Adam's talking about intercession. In my understanding, intercession is like kind of on the court, and the judge is God. So if in this worldly life, we saw that about, if you ever heard about Judge Bao, you know that, Adam?
Judge Bao, is that a
Yeah,
funny judge?
Judge Bao is in Chinese history.
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, he always
Right.
looking for evidence and everything. So it seems the intercession, like kind of I don't know, maybe a witnesses or something. He give a permission to speak to speak up, and then he asked for pledge or something like that to the victim. But actually the judge know where's this case have to end up. So I think about intercession is like kind of like that. God knows, but he give the person to speak up about the victim that will go to hell or heaven. I think the most simple logical is like that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you get what I mean, Adam.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, even it's like, you mean to say standing in the court and you're fighting a case and you say a few words about somebody in their defense, right?
Yeah,
So,
but actually
right,
the
yeah.
judge know.
Judge
Where's the
knows,
person?
yes.
Yeah,
Right, true.
I think it's more simple to understand about that.
Right. At the same time, the in the appendix it says that it won't even much matter if somebody is idol worshiper. For sure, that person will not benefit from it, and anybody who's going to heaven is going to heaven. So basically, it's a very it's I think in religion, it won't even matter, I guess.
Yeah, so it's useless.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's useless because
it's
I
just
found in the last paragraph of the appendix, seems like it's written like the mother asking for for the plates, right?
right. See, mashallah, God put stuff in the Quran for believers and disbelievers, and God says, obey God and obey messenger. So the disbelievers, they take that verse, obey messenger, and they portray material after material saying that, look, God is saying that. So God put these verses for those who have a disease in their heart to go more astray. So these verses, God put them here. So people will read them, and those have disease, they will say, oh, look at, there's intercession, So they will lead on to that.
Yeah. Yeah, the most biggest part of this intersection issue is they forgot that God knows everything.
Right.
That is the most biggest part. Most Muslims didn't understand that. Yeah, God knows everything. God's running everything.
Absolutely.
It does say it's in accordance with God's will, and then we have verses that say only those permitted by God will be able to speak. So there could be a system there.
Yeah,
How
but
it
if you also
works.
look at the appendix, it says, that's just about the day of judgment, but it says, everyone in paradise will intercede on behalf of their loved ones.
Yeah. If they are permitted.
No, it says everyone.
Everyone is
Uh,
permitted.
everyone who is in paradise will intercede on behalf of their loved ones.
Okay, so it's in paradise. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, why would you intercede if you're in hell?
Yeah. Plus, we know that as soon as we leave, the righteous are admitted into paradise, right? They go straight to paradise. So, and they don't know, let's say your mother hasn't died yet, or your grandchildren haven't died yet, right? So you're still there. You don't know what's going to happen to them. Probably their lives have not even been finished yet, right? So they could do more righteous work still and join you.
Oh, you mean like now?
Yeah,
Before
like if you die tomorrow, you
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
paradise, and then you'll intercede for me.
yeah. What will I get in return? Business.
It's business.
Well, if you're ready to die tomorrow, then we can talk about it.
Well, we're all getting a mansion in paradise, so maybe I can get half your mansion. I have 1.5 mansion, 1.5.
I'll give you 50% of all my property. In this world.
I think I have an example of that. Maybe I'm guessing now.
You will get
Bruce
this
Lee.
72 virgin.
Bruce Lee, he died before the age of 40. And then almost immediately his son also dies.
Brandon Lee.
Like, it's very random, very strange accident. So my theory is Bruce Lee went to heaven and he asked God to, I don't know, take Brandon with him to heaven. Because he knew, okay, my son is never gonna make it. Please, God.
Yeah, but that goes against the concept of intercession, right? Because if he's not gonna make it, then it's
no. I mean, he maybe he felt like I'm not sure if he's gonna make it.
Yeah, but Masha Allah, I mean the fact the main thing for people to understand is it is a useless thing. So whether you say it or not say it, it's not gonna change anything really. But I feel that when you go to paradise, if you make it to paradise and you're overwhelmed by, how great it is, you love people, you naturally want that for everyone you love, right? So you'll say,
Yeah, that's true.
you know,
Another comment would be more like question I want to ask about verse 130 is glorify, the word glorify at night and do both ends of the day. I seem to feel it's more effective when you are like not distracted. Like I see some people have this rosary in their hand and they're reading with their lips, and at the same time they have a conversation with people. And I don't understand how you can meditate while you're talking to somebody else. And at the same time, praising at nighttime, like suppose you sit down after Isha and you start saying some praising words. But I feel more productive when you just do it in your heart without even moving your lips, and you're pondering God's creations and blessings, um, and thanking in your heart. I mean, it tends to be more effective. You become more emotional rather than when you sing from your mouth. Like when we do on the Night of Destiny, and we have like here we get all people get together in one house, and we put on the video and everybody is talking. But I don't feel anything in my heart. But when I do it alone and doing it in my heart, I'm remembering God. It just become emotional. Sometimes you have tears coming out. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's different for each person. I personally meditate the best out loud, almost talking to myself.
mhm. Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
yeah.
doing it in your privacy is important, but saying it out loud or silently, I don't know. That could vary for people,
Mm.
But doing it in your privacy, where also, and doing it at night, for example, and where you have when God says it's effective, at night and stuff like that. Um, some people like to sing. You can sing it too if you want. But if you're distracted, obviously, then that's not helping you as much, because you have to really mean it. The more you mean it, the more you grow, basically. And I
Okay,
mean,
that
and
makes
those,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, obviously, if you're talking to somebody and at the same time, you have a rosary in your hand and you're just flipping the beats one after another, but
Mm-hmm.
you're focusing on other person's conversation, you're not really paying attention on God.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah, because the whole idea is to remember, really, right? So if you're distracted, you can't really remember. They're just lip service, right?
Right.
Okay, so what do you guys think
I
about
oh, sorry.
verse 123?
Sorry, I have an opinion about this
Oh,
130. In my understanding, it's just like to make a bold on the sentence before, because it's like praise and glorify your Lord before sunrise and before sunset, and during the night glorify Him as well as at both end of the day. So during the night glorify Him which means we have to glorifying Him at the night, like we glorifying Him on the sunrise until before sunset. So it's like make a red line to make it bold, the sentence.
I think we don't need to get hung up on these times, because there's other verses where God says, you do it throughout the day and night.
Yeah, I mean the first
God's,
the words of both end of the days, both.
yeah, basically it's saying just do it all day,
Yeah.
before sunrise, before sunset, during the day, at both ends of the day,
Yeah, it's
So that's like
like
pretty much the whole day
yeah,
and
it
night.
just make it bold.
Yeah, I think God is revealing this verse and giving us it in this way because it becomes like a landmark, before sunset, after sunset, before sunrise, after sunrise. It becomes like a landmark that makes it easier for us to, when we see the sun and we're like, oh yeah, I need to remember God. Maybe we
Yeah.
are like busy working, and when it becomes like a landmark, we see when we see the
Repeating.
sky becoming like a rose, like rosy red,
Yeah, exactly.
like a landmark. I think that's the purpose with the verse.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course there's a verse that says all day, okay, all
Yeah.
day. But then there's this verse that creates a landmarks for us throughout the day to help us uphold the other commandment that says throughout the day. So it's all intricate. SubhanAllah. God is doing so much for us, and yeah. I mean, yeah.
Oh, what do you want to talk before that I interrupt you, Ahmed?
Verse 123.
123.
Yeah. He said, "Go down there from all of you. You are enemies of one another." He said that this means that like everyone is an enemy of each other. Like men like all men are enemies of other men. Women are enemies of other women. Like jealousy and rivalry. Like this instinct.
Yeah.
But then when you become a believer, when you submit, God guides you. That disappears. God helps you to make that feeling of enemy, like that other people are your enemies. God removes that from you
Yeah.
and helps you see your true enemy, like Satan and his lies and deceit and how it affects people and all that stuff. You become this more mature person. But for those who don't believe, they will be stuck in this instinct like animals. They see other people, they become jealous of them, and women who see other women maybe more beautiful or whatever, they become jealous of them, and I think they are there are some very horrifying stories as well. Someone is jealous of another person, and they like do something very cruel towards them, ruin their marriage, ruin their life, or even kill them or whatever, or make a trap for them to shame them. All kinds of like very evil things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it something you guys have thought about, or is it just me?
I have to think about that. I have to think about that because it's a natural instinct for
Yeah.
of all human is intolerant.
Yeah.
I think
That
what I think about it is that when it says go down as enemies of one another, it's that the jinns and the humans are both going down, right?
Yeah.
And you have your companion that is your enemy. He's always trying to the descendant of Satan, and he's always trying to push Satan's point of view. And then so that's one side of it. In addition to also to what you said, mashallah, which
Yeah.
is good. Yeah.
yeah, it can be like that too.
But I mean, like that's what the verse says. Like these people. Are you gonna send those people? Who, when it said, the angel said that will shed blood and all that, right? So
Exactly.
that's what they're gonna be doing on Earth, and
I'm
we see
thinking
that
about.
with all the wars and everything.
Yeah. I'm thinking of all those other verses and from experience as well, and like yeah, what you read in history and
Yeah.
psychology and all that stuff, and you get this picture that okay, so this is basically applying to everyone.
Mm.
And God says, like your spouses and children can be your enemies, and um, so you have so many enemies. The believers have enemies. The disbelievers have enemies. Among themselves, and so there's pretty much Satan's domain, basically. So there's all gonna be. Most people are enemies because they're dragging you. They're going to
Oh
hell,
yeah,
and they're
yeah,
dragging the rest of the people with them. Even they could be your friends, but they're really your enemies because they're inviting you
mm.
to hell, right?
Yeah. Like the jinns are also enemies of each other. Like there are good jinns versus bad jinns and all that stuff. So and yeah, bad weather friends, or no, maybe not bad weather friends, but what, bad friends in general who invite to hell. Those are the worst. I had to get rid of a lot of them
Yeah,
over
I
the
think
course of my life.
it's an ongoing process for me.
Yeah, I mean, I gave them a lot of time. You give them time, like, and you try every angle, you know, to convince them, but you're only fooling ourselves. I mean, at some point, I realized, like, you know what? Okay, whatever. Let's see
I
what
think,
happens, and I just stopped
yeah,
engaging.
I think if you if your friends are really bad, like really really bad, they might convert to submission, and then they'll become their
Yeah.
worst and turn into hypocrites.
About
That's the worst.
Yeah, but not only friends, relatives as well. I had relatives
Yeah,
who said,
exactly.
"Oh, why don't you fast? Don't fast. Come party with us." I'm like, "What?
Um,
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk to you anymore." It's crazy. I was at this was many years ago. I was at a party, like a home party, someone's birthday, basically. Nothing fancy, just family members. And then my cousin comes to me with alcohol, and he knows, I'm a submitter. I don't drink, but he just shoved it in my face. Here, drink. You need it.
oh my god. That's good.
So bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we have to run from such people.
Yeah, there's also no value. They
So
don't
tell us the
increase.
truth, Ahmed.
What?
Tell us the truth. Did you drink or not?
No, I didn't.
Come on, man. We are off the YouTube now.
But I did drink on a different occasion.
Come on, nobody's listening.
And I got punished for it. But on that occasion, I didn't drink. Well, I just poured
So
it.
you did it.
So you did it.
No, I didn't.
Needs to say on other occasions.
Yeah, but there was a different occasion. But different friend.
Maybe it was
like I said, I had to get rid of a lot of people. Like I said.
It was maybe apple juice, right?
Yeah, it was apple juice. No. You have those people who say, "Oh, you hate alcohol because you haven't tried this." Right?
Oh,
No, you need to try this and you will like it. And that was my mistake. I wanted to. No, I didn't want to drink, but I wanted to shut them up by proving that it is disgusting. No matter what you give me, it's disgusting. So I kept drinking and drinking and drinking.
oh my God. Yeah. Yes,
Yeah, it wasn't a pretty sight.
Oh, that's the picture you have on your Facebook with your eyes are red, right?
No. That's I'm talking about something very long time ago.
Yeah.
Those with red eyes is.
That's
very
just
new.
a bad picture.
That's Adobe, yeah.
It's a good picture.
It's
the only photo that captures me.
He shows his true himself.
Yeah. No, that's a good picture. I don't know. Every time Ahmed changes his picture, people like to pick on him.
Yeah, I don't exist. That's why.
It's a Kodak. It's a Kodak moment. Right? I like the picture. I try to put lenses in my eyes. How can I get a red eye? Punching myself in the eye.
No. That's primitive technology. We have Photoshop now. Oh my God! Imagine. I don't know. You know how people have these crazy fashion ideas.
Yeah.
What if they invent like a black eye fashion? They go around punching themselves.
To me, it's funny how they take the selfies with their face, how they make their faces.
Yeah.
I had a dream once about Satan, and I saw he had yellow eyes.
Oh,
really?
So I'm good then.
Yeah. Yeah, like his the pupils were yellow.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
How did it look like?
Well, he was like very dark, and his skin was all cracked. Like you go to the desert or something, like there's a lot of mud and there's water, and then the land dries and you see cracks in the land.
Right.
It was like that, but it was like literally black, like coal.
Wow.
And his eyes were yellow. That's what I remember.
Yeah, it could just have been a manifestation. I mean, he can look all kinds of ways.
Seems like Constantine. Like Constantine the movie. You remember that?
Yeah. I hate that movie.
If you
Yeah.
guys are done, we could Ahmad, if you could end the stream, God willing.
Yeah. If no one wants to comment on any more verses, okay, I will end the stream. Who will do the
Yeah,
ending
inshallah, God
credits?
willing. You could do it. I think our next speaker is who's gonna do the next study, God willing. I guess me. I'll be next. I think somebody's on. Pamela, you're not on mute. Someone's not on mute.
Yeah, let's wait. I'm just gonna.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to end the stream, and we hope to see you again next time, Wednesday. I keep forgetting the time.
It's at 4:30 Pacific time.
4:30 Pacific time, inshallah. Until then, take care and have a nice weekend.